Hello, and welcome to Creative Marketing TV. My name is Susan Joy Schlief, and I'm your host and your trainer for today. On Creative Marketing TV, the first Saturday of every month is reserved for a special training hangout, and that's what we're doing today. Our topic today is March multipurposing madness, and I'll tell you in a minute what that's all about. The other Saturdays of every month are used to interview various experts about different topics related to marketing. So be sure to catch some of our upcoming expert interviews. But today, as I said, we're doing a training hangout. And we're talking about how to repurpose your content marketing in multiple different formats, different shapes and sizes for your images, different forms of content, whether that's a video or a slideshow or tip graphics to share on social media or even an infographic. We're going to talk about how to plan your content ahead of time so that it's easy to repurpose it in those multiple formats. I like to call it multi-purposing. So let me bring up my slides and we'll get started. I have some slides to show you initially, and then I will do a little bit of a demo and wrap it up with some more slides. There we go. So March multipurposing madness. March madness is an expression that I will explain in more detail in a minute. Some of you probably know what it is, but some of you might not. But first, have you experienced the madness, the frustration and craziness of trying to share your visual content across multiple social media platforms? I'm sure most of you have. It can be pretty frustrating since each platform has its own unique size and dimensions that you need to use in order to upload images. And then if you want to make sure that your images display properly on a mobile device, it gets even crazier. So I wanted to bring in just a few more ideas around madness. One is the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland. And that expression, mad as a hatter, actually comes from the hat making industry, where they used to use a chemical compound that contained mercury. So all day long as they were working on creating hats, making the fabric into felt that was used to create the hats, they were using this compound that had mercury in it, and so they were inhaling mercury vapors all day long. Well, we know now that mercury is not good for the brain, and so Mad as a Hatter really referred to somebody who was in the hat making industry and was developing dementia or some other serious mental illness. Then there's another expression, mad as a March hare, which supposedly refers to the fact that rabbits get rather excited and a little crazy in their behavior when their mating season begins around March. I don't think that Tea Party madness is a real saying, but I wanted to use this additional illustration from Alice in Wonderland that has both the Mad Hatter and the March Hare sitting at the tea party table. And if you recall from either from seeing the movie or from reading the book, that tea party gets a little crazy, right? So mad at the tea party, right? Tea party madness. And then, of course, we have March Madness, which has to do with college basketball tournaments here in the US. And a lot of people get really involved in creating these big charts about who's playing whom, which college team is in which part of the playoffs, and the betting is involved often. And so A lot of people spend a lot of their time in March focused on who's winning the college basketball tournaments. It's a type of madness of its own, definitely. Then we have a couple more expressions here. Stop the Madness was actually a music video that was created back in the 1980s. It was supported by then President Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy Reagan as part of their anti-drug campaign in the 80s. There were some people who became quite famous that were in that music video. And I'll put a link to that in a comment under the recording from this video, so you can check it out if you want to take a look at that 1980s music video. And then we have stopping the madness with multi-purposing content. Or as we say, if we get back to our basketball metaphor, we can have a timeout, right? So let me get my notes up here. But before I show you how to create some of this visual content in a different way, I want to touch briefly on why you want to use visual content to promote your product or services or your ideas. And one reason is because the human brain really is designed for visual information. We process visual information about 60,000 times faster than we can process verbal information. The visual processor is a much older part of the brain. Now, I'm not claiming there's any anatomical accuracy about where that arrow is pointing. That's not necessarily the visual part of the brain, but that is the older part of the brain down there at the bottom. I think the visual part is actually up on the side though. But the visual processor is a much older part of the brain. It developed thousands of years before speech developed, and then writing even later than that. Reading and writing didn't happen until much later. So the visual processing part of our brain was around before we even had language to speak. And it was part of what kept us safe as animals in the wild with lots of other dangerous animals around us back then. Now, there's an expression that says that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And while the purpose of that makes sense, they're saying, that you can explain things better sometimes with a picture than you can in words. It's not really a one-to-one comparison. So it's not the most accurate expression because really, as I sort of implied, the visual information is processed in a different part of our brains than verbal information. Pictures are processed in a different part than words. Regardless of whether those are spoken words or words printed on the screen, that's processed in a verbal part of the brain, and pictures in the visual or picture processing part of the brain. So really trying to compare them is more like the old comparing apples and oranges. They're really different things, so you can't say that one is equivalent to 1,000 of the other. But the real point I want to stress here is this idea that written text, whether it's on the slide or in a book or no matter where it is, even though we're using our eyes to process that, it's verbal information, not visual, not picture information. And that becomes important when we start talking about slide design. So the verbal part of the brain is really the same part that processes audio information, not visual information. In fact, you might notice when you're reading something that sometimes it feels like there's a little voice inside your head reading the text to you. That's because it is coming from that same part of the brain that would be listening to the words. So when you're giving a presentation, and if people are trying to read what's on the screen and listen to what you're saying at the same time, it's the same part of the brain that's trying to do that. and it can't listen and read at the same time. So I'll share some tips with you for how to make better use of your audience's brain in absorbing that information. You know, for many, many centuries now, we've been focused in our culture on written or verbal information ever since the development of literacy, reading and writing. There's been more of a slant towards written information. And of course, we had a lot of people in the past who couldn't read or write, but when the printing press came along, that started to change that, and general education for everyone helped to change that. But if you think about, even after the printing press came along, books were mostly text, right? They might include some illustrations. People had pictures that were hanging on their walls, paintings maybe. There were paintings and stained glass windows and sculptures in churches, but there wasn't a ready way to share visual information. And that didn't really develop until the late 19th century, when photography developed, and then early 20th century when movies developed. That's when we really began to have easier access to visual or picture information. And so now the movie industry and television and the internet are actually making our culture much more visual again, which is really, like I said, what our brains are meant to process. But now, instead of looking around and scanning the plains to see if a lion is charging us, now we're looking at movies online or moving GIF images online and things like that. But it's the same part of our brain that's still processing it. So, you know, there's that expression about people making decisions emotionally and justifying them rationally. That makes sense in this context because the pictures really connect with that older part of the brain, which is the part that's emotional and the part that's the decision maker. So the more you can use those pictures to reach the emotional part of the brain, the better chance you have of your audience making a decision in your favor about whatever you want them to do. So let's talk about how to do that. Now, would you like to learn a few behind the scenes secrets about what I'm doing with this presentation? I'm sharing content with you right now, right? In the form of a webinar, and it's visual content. So I'll share one of my secrets with you. I've been using something called visual metaphors. And some of the reasons why I do that are because metaphors are a powerful marketing tool, and visual metaphors are even better. If you use images that your audience's brain already understands, then it helps them to relate to the new information that you're trying to tell them. My sales trainer, Eric Lofholm, calls this connecting the known to the unknown. When you're trying to get people to agree with maybe something that you're telling them that they haven't thought about or they haven't agreed with before, one way to help do that is by taking something they already do know and understand and using that to help them understand the new information. So in this presentation, I've been using the basketball metaphor, and we also had some other metaphors about madness. But visual metaphors are very powerful for helping people understand and process your information. And here's a quote from a book that I highly recommend called Metaphorically Selling. Ann Miller says you have to seize on those visuals that your listener's brain already understands from experience. So the image I used here on this quote graphic is a key. Everybody knows what a key is and how it works. Even though our keys don't look like that anymore, we still know that that's a key and that it will unlock something, right? So here's an example of how you might use that metaphor of a key. I might have a short presentation I'm doing. Maybe I'm going to record it as a tip video. And I might say, I'm going to start out, of course, first with a problem that I want to get people's attention. And I might say, do you struggle with how to get people to watch your videos all the way through to the end? Are you spending a lot of time creating videos and not getting any views, or getting people to drop out halfway through? Well, I'm going to share with you 3 keys that you can use for better slide design in your videos. And the first key is to put only one idea on each slide. Because people have trouble reading and listening at the same time, you don't want to have a lot of text on the screen, because then they'll be reading instead of listening. And I want them to listen to what I'm saying. So if I just give them one sentence that they can read very quickly, and then maybe I add a picture, then I can take a minute or so to explain that text a little bit further, but I don't have to put all that text on the screen. It's actually easier for people to process it if I don't put it on the screen. And then my second key point would be to use more graphics and less text. Normally, I would use more than just the key. Here, I might put a bigger picture of, maybe a picture of people watching a presentation or something like that. But because part of what we're trying to show today is how we can take this key graphic and use it across different formats of content, we'll stick to doing it like this. And it's very fast to do it this way as well. My third key point then is going to be that you need to be clear about your goal for the presentation or the video, and follow it up with a call to action at the end. If you don't know what you want your audience to do when they get to the end of your video or your presentation, then they're not likely to do it, right? You need to be clear about, why are you creating this content? What's the effect that you want to happen at the end of it? And what's the call to action that you're going to give people when they get to the end? A call to action doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to sell something. It could be as simple as click the subscribe button on my YouTube channel, or it could be download my free guide that is available at this link in the description under the video. Or if it's just a training video, it might be, take these tips and go apply them to the next video that you create. So there's an example of a quick way that you can use a visual metaphor to tie your content together, to add some graphics to it, graphics that will actually help your audience's brains absorb those key points. Now, in our content today, in our hangout today, the training that I'm going to give you really is going to be about creating 3 different types of content. Memes, which we could also call quote graphics or tip graphics. The word meme really just refers to some kind of cultural content that in effect goes viral, right? It doesn't have to necessarily even be on the internet. It could be a TV commercial or a book or a movie or something like that, some expression or image or idea that spreads very wildly and rapidly across the culture. And then the second type we're going to look at is an infographic. And the third type is a video, or a slideshow will work as well, because you can turn the slideshow into a video. The other way we could represent these is with pictures like this. So the quote graphic inside of the picture frame there in the upper right, and then the video on the tablet, and the infographic, which sort of shows the idea that it's vertical and it's different pieces stacked together, right? Now, let's think about the shape of the content for these different forms. A video, if it's shared on YouTube particularly, is going to be horizontally very wide, right? An infographic doesn't have a fixed size, but generally people create them to be taller rather than wide, like the video. And a quote graphic or tip graphic also doesn't have a fixed size, although there are preferred sizes on Facebook and on Twitter. And Twitter actually prefers them a little bit wider, not square like this. But I've found that on Facebook, this square shape actually shares the best and displays the best in the newsfeed. So how are we going to create graphic content, visual content, that's going to work in these three very different layout formats? Well, part of my solution, oh, I forgot, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting that this part comes in between here. Before I give you the solution, we need to talk about this HD or widescreen layout for the YouTube videos. Because if you're still using the old style of slide layout, the 4x3 slides, then you're going to have a problem. And I want to show you visually what that's going to look like. This 16:9 layout, which is what YouTube uses, right? It's widescreen or it's HD format, high def format. That's what the YouTube player requires. That's the shape of the YouTube player. And as you can see from the measurements that I laid across the sides there, it's almost twice as wide as it is tall. Now, if you're using the old PowerPoint format, which you might be if you're using anything older than 2013, if you're using 2010 or 2007, the default layout in there is the 4x3. So you may not even realize that you need to change it. What happens when we take that 4x3 slide shape and try to put it into these YouTube screen dimensions? Well, you get extra space on the side because the slides are not wide enough to fill up the YouTube player. So what do you think YouTube does with that? It fills in black bars on the sides. If you've ever seen those black bars and you haven't been sure where they came from, or maybe you never really noticed that they're there, but if you're using the old style of slides, they are there. Now, there's nothing wrong with that slide format. In fact, if you share your slides to a site called slideshare.net, they use that 4x3 slide size. But on YouTube, you need the widescreen slides. So here's another tip for you then. If you're creating slides that are going to be used in a video, they should be HD or widescreen, which is on PowerPoint a 16:9 slide layout. So the solution now for our graphics in terms of how we're going to create this content to work in all these different shapes, the solution is to go modular and combine things together in different ways for those different formats, just like you would do with building blocks, right? You can stack them tall or you can lay them out side by side. Here's an example of what we might use in a slide for a video. It's a nice photo doesn't quite fill up the slide screen, right? We have some blank area on the side here. We don't want to just stretch the photo across there because then it will get distorted. So one thing we could do is to put a rectangle shape over that space at the end and actually cover up part of the picture as well, so there's enough room to put text over that rectangle. And that looks nice. We could have a quote on the side there, or a tip like this. We could even make that black rectangle a little bit wider if we had more text that we wanted to include in there. And that would work just fine using that kind of layout to create a presentation or a video. We could even take this and turn it into a quote graphic or a tip graphic. We would crop off more of the photo to get more of a square shape. And then we could bring our text over and put it on top of the dark area of the photo. And that works fine too. But what happens if we are going to then create an infographic that has a tall, narrow shape like that? Well, the photo's not going to work so well in there, is it? Especially if we wanted to use multiple photos for different points in our infographic. Photos just don't work right for infographics. So what are we going to use instead? Well, I recommend that you either use clip art, good high quality clip art, or vector graphics. Now, there are some advantages of vector graphics. For one thing, they're often simpler illustrations, don't have a lot of complexity. It's not always true, but you can certainly find simple ones. Simpler than a photo, where there's a lot of variation in the background image on a photo and things like that. And you want the images to be simple because we're trying to take advantage of that fact we talked about earlier, that the brain can process images quickly. If they can't tell what the image is, or there's stuff in the background that isn't clear, they might get focused on, what is that in the background? I can't quite make that out. And pretty soon they're focused on figuring out what the picture is really about instead of listening to the information that you're trying to share with them. Another advantage of vector graphics is that they are scalable without getting distorted. And we talked about if we tried to expand that picture, it would get misshapen and distorted. Even if we didn't change the dimensions and we just tried to make it bigger, it's going to get pixelated and it's not going to look clear. With vector graphics, you don't have to worry about that. They're scalable, and they often come with transparent backgrounds, which is a big advantage when you're creating an infographic. But there are disadvantages with vector graphics too. They can't be edited in some visual editing programs, like PowerPoint, for instance. PowerPoint doesn't know what to do with vector graphics unless you convert them to another form that PowerPoint can work with. So you would need to use maybe a program like Inkscape, which is a free vector editing software. There are others that you could use as well, but you may not have that software or know how to use it. So the alternative is use icons or clip art or some kind of illustration that, again, is going to be fairly simple lines and shapes. You want to look for ones that are simple. You want minimal detail. And again, you want to find them in a transparent background, especially if you're going to be creating an infographic with it. Now, sometimes icons and clip art and illustration are not available as transparent, but often you have a choice of how you want to save them, and you can get them with a transparent background. Transparent PNG usually is what it will be. So again, we're talking about being able to rearrange them in different formats like this. And in order to do that, when we're working in PowerPoint as our visual designer, there are a couple of things that I recommend in terms of designing your slides when you're going to turn them into a video. And you already saw some of them when I gave you the demonstration earlier, right? One thing is to use more graphics and less text. One idea per slide. And to always have a call to action. Be clear about what that's going to be before you start creating your presentation or your video. So at this point, I'm going to come out of this presentation and share a different file with you, and I'm going to show you how we would do that conversion to take it from one format to another. So give me just a second to switch things over here. Stop sharing that. And then I need to bring up my other file. So I actually have the slides all put together for the slideshow or video. And wait a second here, make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Yeah, I don't think I am. Give me a second here. Get out of that one. Okay, now we don't need to have it in slideshow mode, so this should be fine then. All right, so here's a few slides that I put together that I might use to create a video about 4 tips for writing a video script that people will watch. So just as I said earlier with that quick demo, I might start this one off by talking about the problem, and identifying the audience that I want to target. So I might start with a question at the beginning of my video and say, do you spend a lot of time creating videos and then finding that nobody watches them, or they watch a few seconds and then quit? Well, one of the important things that you need to do to create a video that people will watch all the way through is to write a good script. So let me share with you 4 keys for writing a video script that people will watch. So now I've already defined who the video is for. If somebody's watching the beginning of that and they say, I don't create videos, they know they don't need to watch it because it has nothing to do with them, right? So I've called out who my target audience is. I've identified a problem that they're facing. We can even take that a step further if we use the problem, agitate, solve formula that people talk about sometimes. Once we've identified that problem, we can agitate it a little bit and get the audience to really get in touch with how frustrating it is to spend all that time creating a video but not get very many views on it, or get people to drop out before they watch the whole thing. So we want to get them really in touch with the emotion of the problem they're facing so that they're going to be more likely to want to find a solution to it because they want to get out of that painful situation. So as I go through this now, that would all be on the opening slide, and then I would move into my first key point, which is to identify your specific target audience. I might say a couple sentences about that. No additional slides. We're going to stay on that just enough to give a few sentences explanation and move on to the next one, because we only want the whole video to be about 3 minutes, right? So we don't need to go into a long explanation. And we certainly don't want to have all that text on the screen because it's going to distract people. Our second key point is to find a big problem that you can help them solve. The third key is to tell your own struggle and how you solve the problem eventually. And then the fourth key is to make them an offer they can't refuse. And again, that offer doesn't have to be a paid one. It could be download my free video or my free report, or it could be sign up for my free webinar, whatever the next step is that you want them to take. And then I would have that, kind of wrap that up in a conclusion at the end of this tip video of what the next step that I want them to take, right? Excuse me. So in this file here, I have some additional layout styles that could be used to present some of these tips. They don't all have to be in the format that I used, but I like those with the pictures in the background. So what I want to do now, to create this video, what I would do would be to record the audio track. I usually record the audio separately, record the slides, and then I combine them in Camtasia Studio. If you don't have Camtasia Studio or another video editing tool, you can record the audio track right in PowerPoint and then output the whole thing as a video. That's something I'll have to show you in another training because we don't have time to do that now. But what I want to focus on today is how do we take this now and put it into another format? So what I'm going to do is save a copy of this PowerPoint file. And I'm going to call this one Sample Keys Infographic. And now the first thing I want to do in this new version of the file is change the layout. So I go to Design, I go to Slide Size and Custom Slide Size. We're actually not going to change the size on this one, but we want to change it from landscape to portrait so that it's tall instead of wide. But I'm going to leave the numbers the same here. So I'll change it to portrait. And I'm going to choose maximize here. And notice what that does is it moves some of the content pieces off of the new slide shape. And that's fine. I'm going to show you how to deal with that. And it looks like by default it brought up the purple variant. So we'll switch that back to green. Now, I'm going to do this the easy way for this demo so it doesn't take too long. But normally what I would probably do would be to create a couple different versions of this slide. Maybe have the bottom of the infographic with this black part here, and then create another slide to go above that that was all green background like this. And then as I lay out the elements on those two slides, then I'm going to save each one as an image file, a JPEG file. Then I'm going to go to a collage, a photo site like ipicky.com is one of my favorites. And I'm going to take those 2 or 3 image files and combine them together into one long, tall collage. I don't have time to show you that today, so I'm just going to do a really short version of just one slide. So what I'm going to do is take this text here that was our title, and since I'm only doing one slide, I'm going to move that down here to the bottom. And then I'm going to take my name and first make it a lot smaller. And I probably would add a copyright to that too, you know, maybe put my company name and a copyright symbol. I'm not going to take the time to do that right now. Then I'm going to take one of these keys and make it quite a bit smaller. And I'm going to get rid of the other ones. Bring this over here. Then let me come down here and copy my text from my first key. Actually, I think I'll just copy the whole text box. I don't need to create one on the other slide. And we're going to want to make that text smaller, obviously. Let's try maybe 28. And then I'm going to copy the key, bring it down here. And maybe just for variety, I will flip that one around horizontally. And I'm going to go copy my second key point. And again, I want to bring that text size down to 28. Change the shape of it a little bit. So you can see this is how we would put together our short infographic, right? We might be able to fit 2 more in here, or we might just put 3 on here. Depends. We could adjust the layout a little bit if we needed to. We could make this wider so it's only 2 lines. That would help us be able to get 2 more underneath. So it's pretty simple, right? Just rearranging things to fit into the new format. So let me just save this quickly. Actually, I'll show you how to save it as a picture file, even though it's not finished. But once it is finished, we would come up here to File, Save As. And instead of saving it as a PPTX file, we want to change that to a JPEG, an image file. And then I would change the name of it to, maybe we'll call it Tips Infographic. And it's going to ask you, do you want to do that with all the slides, save them as pictures, or just this one? And then you would have an image file that's ready to upload to Pinterest or to SlideShare or Facebook or wherever you want to show that infographic. So let me move on now to, I'm going to close this out and actually go back to the other file, the one that I was using as a video file, right? don't need to save. Oh yeah, I do want to save that. All right, so let me get that one open again and then I'll share it. So we're back in this file again with our 4 keys. And let's see now how we can turn these into individual tip graphics to share one at a time on social media. So again, I'm going to make a copy of the file, save as, and I'm going to call it sample keys tip graphics. And once again, I want to change the slide shape. So I go to Design, Slide Size. And this time I'm going to create a square shape. So I need to come in here and change this so that the height and the width are the same. And then click OK. Again, I want to choose Maximize. It's going to leave some of the stuff off the side of the slide, and that's fine. We're going to move it. We want to change this back to the green again. Now, because I'm going to be sharing these one at a time, I'm not going to need a title, right? Because each one is going to have all the information contained in it. So I'll get rid of the title. And then I actually want to get rid of the, well, no, I don't need to get rid of that. We can copy this text in there. Here, text. And let's see. I think what I want to do actually is bring that down here. Let me get this out of the way first. It's not quite small enough. Let's go maybe to 12. And we'll bring that down to the bottom. And normally I would put my business company name and a copyright symbol in there as well. And then we'll bring this in and drag this down to the bottom. Now that's going to need to be smaller. Let's try 32. Yeah, that's good. We'll move it up a little bit. And again, I want to get rid of those. That way I don't have to resize it 4 times, right? I can resize it once and then copy the smaller version of it. So I want to copy this to go with the key image. But because we don't have an overall title now, I'm actually going to expand on this and say the first key for better video scripting. And then we want to add an image here. Now, the way we had this for the video with these photos, actually doesn't look very good when we transfer it over into this narrower format, right? It worked, excuse me, it worked fine when we had a widescreen slide, but now that we have this narrower slide, I think it looks kind of strange to have that divided vertically, and then the photo is so narrow on the side. So that's why I'm using this one up here instead. And rather than try to put a photo in here, I'm going to bring in an icon or clip art image. So let me go to Insert and Pictures. I have one that I picked out here, so let me scroll down and find it. These are from a site called the Noun Project, and you can use them for free if you want to give attribution on the screen. I prefer not to do that, so I actually have a paid subscription. Now that's much too big, of course, so let's shrink that down. It could be a little bigger than that. Okay, so there's our tip graphic. The first key for better video scripting is to identify your specific target audience. So there's the speaker and his audience, right? Now, there's another layout that we could use. Let me show you that. If we bring in a new slide, and let's choose this format with just a little bit of green at the top and mostly black. However, if we're going to use this graphic, that's not going to show up against the black background, right? So I'm going to change the background color. I'm going to right-click on it and choose Format Background and change that to white. And now we can copy this graphic and paste it down in the bottom of this layout. We can copy our key and our text box. Let's do it like this. Grab the text box, and I'm holding the Control key and clicking on the image. Then I can copy them both together and bring them over here. And then I'm going to bring them down into this area. And then I want to take our title text and put it in here. And let's make that a little bigger. We have the room. All right, then I probably would put my name and my company name across the bottom here. But that's a nice layout as well for a tip graphic. What I might do with this one, since it has the white background on a lot of it, those I found when I display those on Facebook, they look a little like they're not cohesive because there's nothing that's tying all of this together as being part of the same image. So what I might do is put a line around there, and there's no easy way to do an outline when you're saving this as a picture, so I just would draw a box on the screen and get it right as close to the edge as I can, and make it with no fill. And so it's just the line around the whole slide, and then that helps to tie it all together. So this is how we would create our different tips. And again, it's, you know, it's a little work to rearrange things, but you don't have to come up with new ideas from scratch. You've already got the tips created. It's just a matter of reorganizing them in a different shape. Like I said, using a modular format to rearrange things in a different format. And once again, we would save this as an image file, so it's ready to go up on Pinterest or Facebook or Twitter. All right, so let me come out of here and head back to my slides, and we'll wrap up the presentation, wrap up the training hangout. So let me put this back in slideshow mode. And then I'll share it. Okay, so just to review here, the slide design tips. As you saw, we used more graphics and less text. We used one idea per slide for the slideshow, for the video, for the quote graphics. Obviously, for an infographic, we're not going to do that because the whole idea of an infographic is to have a list of things, right? And we had a call to action for our video. For an infographic, we might as well. We might have a link at the bottom that we're asking people to go download something free or sign up for something. Tip graphics, probably we're not going to do that because it's only one little piece of information. Now, you're not always going to get the results you want. So as you experiment with creating different kinds of content like this, you need to be a bit of a mad scientist, right? You need to experiment and keep trying different things and see what results you get. Keep testing and keep tracking your results. Now, I do have a call to action for you today, and it's not a paid one. What I am going to do, though, is invite you to go through my new email course that I call Taming the Content Marketing Dragon. And I'm actually in the process of repurposing this content from something that I created a couple years ago. And I thought, you know what, there was a lot of good content in there. I need to go back and reuse that. What would be another good format for it? And I thought it would be pretty easy to break it up into an email course in small chunks, so it's not a lot of information for people to process. So I'm in the process of doing that now. And while I'm reformatting it all, I would like to invite you to go through it for free through the end of March, when I expect to finish reformatting it, and then I will be selling it in the future. But this is your chance to go through it at absolutely no cost. After you sign up for the course, you will receive 3 emails per week for a total of 4 weeks. And each email is going to contain a short lesson, either a PDF or it might be a PDF with video links in it for you to watch a short video. And each lesson will also have a task for you to complete in your process of creating your own content marketing story, because the whole course is really focused on taking your content that's maybe in the form of a report or a slideshow or a webinar or an article or something like that, and turning it into a story, which is going to be maybe more engaging for your audience, or at least a different way of approaching the information. So there's a lot of information in my course about how to do that, how to create a story out of your existing content. And as I said, each lesson will have a little task for you to do in that process. Now, the purpose of my offering this for free is for you to give me feedback while I'm redesigning the content. So if you have questions as you go through it, if something's not clear or it's too difficult to follow, you can email me and I'll get back to you and help you out with it. But that will also let me know that I need to modify something before the paid version is released. So, and when you are watching the replay from this hangout, there will be a little letter I on the screen somewhere, or below the screen if you're watching it on a mobile device. You can click on that I and it will give you a sign up link where you can go and enter your email address to register to go through this course for free. Even if you decide not to do it, I encourage you to at least click on the I and take a closer look at what's in the course. There's a little bit more of a description that will come up when you click through the link. The first link doesn't commit you to anything. All it will do is give you more information about the course. Then if you decide that it is something you want to do, click on the second link and it will give you the sign-up form. And again, it's a great opportunity to receive the information for free in a format that will help you implement it one step at a time. And remember, the free course is only going to be available to the end of March. So I want to thank you very much for watching this training. If you have any questions about this training video or any questions about the email course, please leave a comment for me below the video and I'll respond as quickly as I can. I always appreciate feedback from my viewers. And I look forward to seeing you and hearing from you inside the email course as well. Thank you again and have a great day.